Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's study. And we're going to continue digging into these verses here in Daniel chapter 11. But before we begin, can you join me in a word of prayer? Dear Father in heaven, we are so grateful for all the things you do in our lives. And we are thankful for the time that we have to study together. So we lift up one another in prayer. We know that we are living in a very difficult time in Earth's history. And there's things around us which we have no control over, but we know, Lord, that you oversee all events, and not just in the histories of ancient kingdoms, or the history of the Jews, but also in our personal lives and in this movement. And we are thankful for that. We ask for your Spirit's presence as we open your word together. We ask that you can speak to us and teach us and guide us. And we pray this and ask it in Jesus' name. Amen. Well, good morning again. Now, I don't know how everyone else feels about the study so far this week, but I'm pretty happy with how we're working through things. And we've had some good discussions and things that we still are uncertain about. And so we had done that review, and then we started looking at verse 23 and looking at the Jewish League. And we're starting to look at this history, not just how it was originally the original fulfillment, but also the applications to our time. And we are at some point going to draw these on a line, which I think are going to be very helpful. But for now, I haven't chosen to do that, but we will. So we looked at finishing off yesterday. We looked at this after the League, which is the Jewish League. We have 161 to 158 BC. Stephen has done a lot of research in that. And, whether Miller understood it correctly or not, we still have these dates, which I think we can say are reliable. It's just that there's some uncertainty because there are different perspectives on how to understand what's written in Maccabees and also what Josephus says. And those are basically our main two sources for these dates. He's going to make this league with pagan Rome. So we look at the League, we see the parallel with spiritual formation at 9/11 that is done between the Seventh-day Adventist Church and the Protestants. And this has to do with, of course, getting accreditation for our schools so that we can share ministers, basically. I'm not sure why the Seventh-day Adventist Church would need the accreditation of something outside of the Adventist Church. But I guess part of the idea is, our ministers can go to other people's schools, and the idea is other people can come to our schools. Other churches can come to our schools and get degrees. So, these courses would then be transferable, and if somebody wants to become a minister, if it's convenient, I guess, for them to go to an Adventist seminary, even if they're not an Adventist, they might do so, but still use those credits or whatever for whatever seminary or that they're going to get their ministerial degree in. So it just seems to me kind of an odd thing why Adventism has to do that, why we wouldn't just have schools for our own church, why we need one that's connected. But anyway, that's a whole other discussion. That's what that league is. And of course, he shall work deceitfully. So the idea here, now we have pagan Rome and spiritual formation for the Protestants, but if we have he, who is it? Who is the he referring to? So we have, he makes a league with pagan Rome. So pagan Rome, we're saying here, this has to do with spiritual formation of the Protestants. But would not he be the papacy in this case? That the papacy is working deceitfully through this spiritual formation. In our history. So So if we just did this, does that make sense? That even though the league is with the Protestants, that this is actually the way that the papacy is working deceitfully. Yeah. Right, because we can see that spiritual formation is something that comes from Catholicism. It's adapted by Protestants, right? But really, it's idol worship, right? It's paganism. Um, so this deceitfully is furthering the interests of papal Rome within Adventism, right? Because the whole idea that the papacy has is to bring these churches back to the mother, right? All of these daughters. And so this is one of the ways that they have done it. And they've done it in lots of different ways through the years. We know, of course, Vatican II was really a move to evangelize other churches through music and worship and different things. And these have all been gradually adopted by evangelicals. Okay. So he shall come up. So of course we know here that the him here is pagan Rome. So in this context, in 63 BC, this is going to be Pompey, right? So we could probably put this here in just then we'd have to figure out if he equals something in our history. So we wanted to think about what that event would be that would mark this siege. So Pompey refers to something, and there's this siege that goes on. Shall become strong with the small people. We talked about that there are different interpretations of this, either referring to the Jews or just referring to the fact that Rome is I don't know, a small people. So just not really sure how we would address that. Do you have any ideas on that, Stephen? Can you explain about why the small people would refer to Rome itself? It just means a few or little.
Well, I can just say what Swearingen says.
Yeah.
So he says Rome would use the Jewish League, hold on, yeah, to his advantage by working deceitfully to become strong. Well, he says actually with this small people, so I'm taking it. It's actually, maybe he says it's the Jews. Yeah, he applies it to the Jews.
Yeah, I'm just trying to remember on how he did it. I think he applied it to the Jews. Who applied it to Rome?
Uriah Smith.
Uriah Smith. Okay.
So Uriah Smith says, at this time, the Romans were a small people and began to work deceitfully or with cunning, as the word signifies. And from this point, they rose by a steady and rapid ascent to the height of power, which they afterward attained.
Okay. Now, what can we do possibly to, I mean, now the word people there is goy or goyim, right? So it's often refers to the Gentiles or the nations, right? Just looking at, I want to look here.
Wouldn't really apply to the Jews then?
Yeah, that's the thing is it wouldn't generally apply to the Jews. So usually it refers to a foreign nation or a Gentile, but it can refer to I think the Jews at some time. Sometimes I think it is reference to the Jews. I'm just trying to see what I can do here. All right, so nations, nation, Gentiles, people. So the places where it's people, yeah, so I don't see this here. Priest lived there, the ark stood firmly down in the midst of all the people were passed clean over Jordan. So it can refer to Jews. It can be referred to people. And I'm just going to look at these here in Hebrew. Just hang on. Yeah, so there it's in the singular. That's the thing I'm curious about with that one singular as well. So a small people, so it's singular. Normally, if you're going to have it as is this not moving? No, not this translation. Doesn't make sense. So normally you're going to see it with the mem at the end when it's referring to the Gentiles. Okay. So it could refer to the Jews. Now the small just means few. Now the idea then, Uriah Smith, is there's just sort of like a type of infiltration through this contact. Is that the idea? Not that there's not very many Romans, but just that they do this with very few resources. It's not like through the military, coming in. So they're going to become strong with a small people. Strong means to bind fast. To crunch the bones, break the bones, close, be great. So it's kind of an interesting idea. So anyway, the word strong there is very break the bones. To bind fast, that is to close the eyes. Intransitively, to be causatively, to make powerful or numerous. So here, this could be, shall become strong, could refer to, especially in the context of a few people, because the word strong can mean to make numerous, like powerful, but in the sense of numerous, and with a small people. So that would sort of show this contrast. I'm not sharing the screen. I don't know why. There we go. There we go. So, so this idea of strong, just show you here. That's Goy. I need to get the other one. To be vast, numerous, be mighty. Right, so that's normally what it means. Now, there are different forms of the word. So the kal form would be mighty or numerous. The hifl form, to make strong, make mighty. So in this case, just going to look this up. Look up the Hebrew. See what form the word is in. So this is in the kal perfect third person masculine singular. So this would really be to make numerous with a small people. So how would that apply if we're saying that he shall come up, right? Now, this means to ascend, right? This idea. He's going to work deceitfully, right? So this is, of course, through this league. And he shall come up and shall become numerous with a small people. So could that possibly apply to the Jews? Wouldn't this make more sense to apply to the Romans?
Mm. Well, I haven't heard any historians sort of relating that the Romans became numerous due to the Jews. I think that would be a difficult application.
That Uriah Smith is using, or I can't remember which one's using which.
Well, Swearingen, he applies small people to the Jews.
Okay. Okay, he does to the Jews. And
because the Jews were kind of on the fringe. I don't think they were that big of players in Rome becoming so numerous and successful.
yeah, so it'd make more sense that the small people is just the Romans coming into Jerusalem end up becoming numerous in in Judea. But I don't know how numerous they would be in Judea. I don't know. I mean, obviously they're occupying it, but that would make more sense based on the meaning of the word strong.
On the deceit, could you apply that to just that the Roman never really carried through with that league in the sense that Pompey is going to invade?
Right. Yeah, so it's false. The word deceit, of course, fraud, craft, deceit, false, feigned, guile, subtlety, treachery. And that would basically describe what Rome ends up eventually doing. So they have this league. But yeah, they never really follow through with it. It's going to be obviously, I mean, it's a long time later, you know, different government in a sense, but yeah, so that's, but there is this type of deceit that Rome is using, and not just with the Jews, but with others, right? So the idea is Rome offers this sort of freedom or independence, but ultimately you still become part of the Roman Empire, and you're controlled by this nation. But I mean, it's not as bad as being in captivity to somebody like Babylon or Assyria, but it's still, they're conquered. Um, so let me see here. Okay, so this league begins at 9/11, and what we'd have to try to understand is what these events are in our history. So we have the siege of Jerusalem. We put that as 63, when Jerusalem is conquered by Pompey.
Well, if the small people does not apply to the Jews in that verse, then could we then, would that not be an argument then saying, well, it doesn't apply to the Seventh-day Adventist Church?
Well, the league does, but the idea is that Rome is becoming strong through this infiltration. So the small people to me would be the idea of infiltration within the church. That's the way that I would understand it. So he's going to come up with a small people, right, to do this. In this league, his deceitful work is this work of infiltration. Because if you think about a few people, I mean, did the Seventh-day Adventist Church get conquered by, after it made this league, did it get conquered by, an overt takeover of the Seventh-day Adventist Church by the Protestant churches and the Catholic Church? No, it's not something done through infiltration. So I'm just thinking of the small people as sort of those that have infiltrated the church and undermined it. Does that make sense? Now, one of the things too, if I take these numbers, so I took the word small people, I added it together, it's 6,063 is the number, and I thought, well, where would I count that from? I'd count it from 9/11, and where it's going to bring me to is the first day of the first month in 2018. So that's April 18th, 2018. So that's going to be 6,063 days after September 11th. Now, as a symbol, of course, we already have the first day of the first month. Does that give us any clue as to how that is connected? Does that just, I mean, you're going to take a number, you're going to find some connections. Is that enough of a connection to say that there's any meaning in that by connecting it to the first day of the first month in 2018? So in 2018, remember, that's going to be the year that we are going to begin this time setting. So it brings us to that year. And we already have connections between September 11th and the first day of the first month as a symbol, right? So the fact that we can connect September 11th to the first day of the first month in 2018 might have significance. I don't know how it helps us necessarily establish, the meaning of a small people, but we know in that history in 2018, we have infiltration, not directly, I'm not saying that Parminder is a Jesuit spy, but definitely he has bought into a lot of ideas that come from Rome. And so in that year that begins on the first day of the first month, which is April 18th, 2018, in that year, we're going to have that time setting coming in. I don't know if there's some date in our movement's history or some other history, the church or whatever, on April 18th in 2018, but we have that symbol there. So that could show some of this infiltration. Yeah, so minorities, maybe. Small people being minorities. So anyway, what that would do, it'd be what that small people would do with the numbers there, would sort of connect 9/11 with what's going to happen in 2018. But maybe there's some specific event that happens April 18th, 2018, but none that I know of. I'm trying to think back then. I mean, I know Parminder has some meetings in Canada in April of 2018. Is it Parminder or Tess, or trying to remember who comes in 2000? It's not Tess. Anyway, there's some meetings there, but I don't know the dates of them. You could try to find it, I guess. But the symbol of the first day of the first month obviously comes into play a lot. So, any thoughts on that? Okay, I know I got an email from Kelly on April 18th regarding these notes for those meetings. I'm just looking at this. Yeah, so they had it from April 15th to 29th. So it doesn't mark April 15th specifically. I'm just seeing though which day I went to it. I think I was there. I think at the end of it, I don't know, 15th to 29th. They had like 2 weeks of it. April 18th is the Wednesday. So first Wednesday in those meetings. Anyway, I know I'm just kind of rambling here trying to figure this out. But we can say that at least at this time, and we have the first day of the first month being marked there, that this whole thing, verse 23, is referring to this infiltration that happens within Adventism, but also within this movement, right? Because it happens in Judea and Jerusalem, and this is the result of this league. Now, as far as this league itself, like the word 2066, 2066. Is there anything about that number? So we deal with the league 2266, pardon me. Anything we can do with that? You know, it's 34 less than 2300. Okay, so one thing we can say about it, if we go to so if we go from Jeff's birthday in 2010, so I'm just going to use this as an example, November 7th, 2010. How old's Jeff going to be in 2010? That's going to be the day I meet Jeff, by the way, November 7th, 2010.
He's 59.
59, because he's born in 41, right? Is that what you're saying?
No, 51.
51. Okay, right there. 51. So that's the day I meet Jeff. And if I count from that date, 2266, I get the inauguration of Trump on January 20th, 2017. So, I mean, that's just the symbol of the word the league. Now, does that have any application if we're going to talk about the league? Or is that just, it just happens the day that I meet Jeff, which is his birthday, that's going to be in Oklahoma, and we count 2266, and it brings us to January 20th, 2017. So maybe that has some meaning. Maybe it doesn't. I mean, obviously we could put it to other January 20th, right? So wouldn't necessarily from November 7th. So maybe there's some other application we could have of this league if we went from September 11th. So let's go. It's going to bring us to November 25th, as a date. In 2007 doesn't really mean anything as far as I can see. Okay. So I don't know. So that's just, again, another number that we could look at. I think there was another thing. Was it? Yeah, if we added the league made with him, so if we added made with, I don't know if that would really make sense. But if we did add it, it would go from generally in most years from February 11th which is Stephen's birthday, to Trump's birthday, June 14th. But I don't know if that has any relevance. Okay, so there were some symbols here that we're still going to take time to look at, and maybe as we start to put these on a line and we start to put dates there, those will be a bit more helpful. Now it says he shall enter peaceably even upon the fattest places of the province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. He shall scatter them among the prey and spoil and riches, yea, he shall forecast his devices from the strongholds, or against the strongholds, but from the strongholds in our understanding of it, even for a time. So we have some symbols here dealing with time. Every time we have that word time, we take note of it. And this historically, I should go to the other document because we can look at that. So we probably should put some of this stuff here. So the small people, here I have Judeo-Palestine, so that would refer to the people of the Jews. But here we're going to say that this small people refers to the Romans through infiltration, we'll call it. And this is, of course,
that part is not making sense to me.
Okay, what part is not?
Romans through infiltration.
Yeah, so the small people are the Romans coming through infiltration. Am I doing something wrong?
I think you've got I mean, I'm looking at that the small people would be more the smaller groups that the Romans took over, because they would go in to a lot of these small groups and give them an offer that, they would come to their aid when needed.
Okay, but this is singular. So it's not peoples. And the idea here is that Rome is going to become numerous with a small people. Right? That's the idea of strong. So this really is numerous.
I'd place your equal sign then.
Equal, like here?
Well, yeah, 6105 equals numerous, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't put an equal there, though.
All right.
Just the way I'm doing it, it's just defining that word.
Okay, fine.
Okay, so numerous. And so the small people, it's either the people that they're becoming strong against, that they're coming up against, or they're a small people that they're using to come up against others, right? In this case, this has to do with, I mean, obviously they're infiltrating, coming up against the Jews, right? So they're entering, because in 63, because it says he shall come up. So they have entered Judea, Syria in 64, 63. So they're going to conquer Jerusalem in 63. That's going to be Pompey. And then shall become strong. They're going to become numerous. Now with a small people. Now part of the idea here too is, so we have with. So in the Hebrew here, right, because you can see they get all of these extra words being added. And so what they do is they put a bet, that's the letter B sound, at the beginning of this word ma'at. So ma'at means little or few, right? And then they put a bet. Now the bet as a prefix usually refers to in, right? So they translated it here as with, right? So the bet prefix usually, it's a preposition, right? So it can be in, it can be with, and it can be at. Okay? So when it's attached to the beginning of the word as a prefix, that's what it means. So it can be translated with, right? But just to note that it could also be translated in. Okay, that makes sense? So they shall become numerous in a small people.
Okay, that has a different connotation.
Right, exactly. So deciding whether it's with or at, we're putting it into English. In Hebrew, I mean, obviously they're not thinking that it has different meanings, if you understand what I mean, right? Like they just see that bet at the beginning of the word, and they have a way in which they understand their language. And then we have to put it in, how do we understand that in English? But the idea of a bet is it's actually a short form of another word, which means within, right? But often they just add the bet to the word instead of adding the whole word. I can't remember what it is, but it's a bit longer word. Like I can't even think. I could look it up, but so they add the bet, and that's the main idea of it, that it's in a small people. Now this idea of in that they have in Hebrew could include the word with that we have in English, but we just have some more distinctions in those prepositions. right? So, but if we took it that way, we could take it that they're going to become numerous in this small nation of Judea or Jerusalem, whatever you want to call it, Judah. Does that make sense? So there is that sense there. And that would make sense, right?
I would agree.
Anyone else with comments on that? Stephen or anyone?
Yeah, certainly another option to consider.
Yeah, because we could just take this word people as meaning nation, right? So within a small nation, right?
I think that's more relevant to what we're talking about.
Yeah. So this would just be more Rome's infiltration of the land of Israel, right? So I don't know, maybe infiltration isn't the right word here because it becomes numerous. But this is really how it conquers Judah. Now, the other thing about being numerous, I mean, when we think about, I mean, I wasn't there at the time, but when you read the scriptures, I mean, it seems that Rome has definitely, the Roman culture is all around the Jews in Jerusalem. I don't know the number of Romans to Jews in the first century. I'm trying to look up. Hmm. Let me see. It's probably a hard thing to know exactly the demographics. You say in Jerusalem, there's between 35,000 and 70,000 people during the reign of Herod. That's in Jerusalem itself, of course. So I don't know if anybody really knows the demographics of the land of Palestine there.
There was Romans there, it would be really those who would be military.
But there's definitely a lot of military. That's what I want to know is, are there Romans living there? I mean, it's a province of Rome. How many Romans would live there? That's the thing I'm kind of interested in. So, you know, the idea of them becoming numerous, what does that mean?
Yeah, I wouldn't think there would be a great deal. Obviously, there would be Romans there, but more as traders.
Yeah.
Rather than people who dwelt there.
Yeah, I mean, you'd obviously have all the administration there, right? So you got the people who obviously, but they use a lot of the national people, like tax collectors, to collect taxes would be Jews, right? Which is why they were so hated. They're like traitors or something. But that's the idea of numerous, right? So numerous with a small people. So we have two different things. They become they're a small people, and they become numerous. So that would be the small people then would refer to the Romans, Or it could refer to right, the small people being the Jews or the small nation, right, that ends up being overrun, so to speak, by Romans. And that's what we don't know. So, I mean, I think all we could do is guess at this point until we get some information that tells us what was actually happening in Judea, in the land of Palestine, as far as was there Roman settlements and so forth, or was it really still just a Jewish country that was just controlled by Rome with, you know, the soldiers and all that type of stuff. So I don't know. I mean, I know the Romans seem to be everywhere. How many Romans are in, you know, like the Romans that we do know about? We have a centurion, right? Obviously, he's a military guy. But I don't know if there'd be a lot of businessmen who live there. There'd be traders, of course. You know, different people would have businesses there or do business there. But it's not really clear, right? So at least we can say that much.
I think after the Bar Kokhba rebellion, I think around 135 AD, around that time.
Yeah.
And then they changed the name of Jerusalem to another, like a Roman name.
Okay.
I can't remember, something Capita or something. And I think the plan there was to have Jerusalem being a Roman city.
Okay.
That they were going to populate it with a lot of Romans, but it never really.
Okay.
It was a failure.
Okay. So one of the things, though, that we can say is that eventually, even though they don't make it a Roman city, they wanted to. I mean, there's this small nation that they conquer, right? They come in first with this league, then they come up with an army, conquer Jerusalem, and this small nation. I mean, the Romans become numerous, right? Doesn't necessarily mean they outnumber the Jews, but at some point in history, it's just part of the Roman Empire and the Jewish nation itself. Obviously, with the destruction of the temple, and you're saying the Bar Kokhba, however you say that, rebellion in what, 135? Did you say AD?
Yes.
Okay. And so that this can refer to events that are going to happen afterwards, right? But that's just one option. So we still have these options open of what it means. Now, he shall enter peaceably upon the fattest places of the province, right? Syria, Judea, and Egypt is what Swearingen, I believe, puts in there. And then we'd have this description of he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers. And we put that as Titus's destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. And then the scattering among them the prey, the spoil, the riches. This is the dispersion of the Jewish people after the destruction of Jerusalem. And then he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, even for a time, right? So this we put as 360 years from 31 BC to 30 AD. So in what we discussed before is that in these two verses is sort of this package of what ends up happening with this league. And this league then brings us to the dispersion of the Jews and finally to Rome moving its capital from Rome, right? So the Roman Empire moving its capital from the city of Rome to Constantinople, right? And that's why it's forecasting his devices from the strongholds, right? So the idea here is that this equals from. I shouldn't put it that way. I should put it this way. I want the equals always between the black bolded historic one, and the red present truth one. So, and we have here in these words the devices, makash haba, and it means a contrivance or a machine, right? So we talked about that. This is like a machine, a plot. And forecast means to, now that's kashab, right? And that means literally or properly to plait, to weave, right? To fabricate, to plot. And so it's and it deals with plot or contrive, right? So the only difference between these two words, obviously Hebrew numbers are quite different, right? Forecast being 2803 and devices being 4284, but they're actually related words. Basically, the difference is there's a mem at the beginning of the word devices. So a mem is a prefix. And so that just changes the word. But the main root of this is this chasab, right? So that's a chet, a shin, and a bet. And if you look at devices, it's going to have a mem, and then it's going to have the chet, the shin, and the bet. And it has an H at the end. So this is just the pluralizing, it's a masculine plural of this. So his devices are his machinery. So he's going to plot with his plotting machines. And then this word against, al, means upon, on the ground of, according to, on account of, on behalf of, concerning, beside, in addition to, together, above, over, by, on, towards, to, against. It has lots of different meanings. So now we put from, it's not normally translated as from, right? But the idea of the word that is upon the strongholds, or the idea of being, this strongholds here is a fortification or a castle. So is he plotting his plots against some fortification for a time, or is he doing it upon this fortification? That is, in the sense of from it, right? Now, one way it could be translated on behalf of, right? But the idea of against, it doesn't really generally have that sense of like coming against a, like if we look at this word here, here, I guess I'll go so you can see what I'm looking at. So there's the word, and if we go to the King James Concordance, you're going to see he divided himself against them, he and his servants by night, and smote them and pursued them unto Hobah, right? So this idea here, the context of this, Genesis 14:15, Abram heard that his brother was taken captive. He armed and trained his servants born in his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan. He divided himself against them. Now it's kind of interesting. He divided himself against them, right? So he's dividing his group of people against them, right? So it could have been translated other ways. Could be because of them or concerning them, right? So lots of different ways in which it could be translated. It looks like we have it in over, Genesis 8:1. God remembered Noah and every living thing and all the cattle that was with him in the ark, and God made a wind pass over the earth, and the waters assuaged. So there you got the same word as against. So you can see passing, obviously not against the earth in the sense of a military conflict or anything. Genesis 6:1, came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and his daughters were born unto them. So the word on is that same word that's translated as against, right? Or over, or on the face of the earth. So you can see how this could be forecasting his devices over the fortress, or from that fortress in that sense, as a, not directly from, as we would think of the word from, but in that place. Okay. So that's a basic interpretation that we have of this scripture, Daniel chapter 11, verse 24, is that the idea is that this is from Rome, right? So that's going to be Uriah Smith. So any comments on this? Are we going to accept this understanding that we've had for a long time? Are we going to question it? Right. Right. So he says Thomas Newton gives the thought of forecasting devices from strongholds instead of against them. This the Romans did from the strong fortress of the seven-hilled city, even for a time. Doubtless refers to a prophetic time, 360 years. From what point are these years to be dated? Probably from the event brought to view in the following verse, right? So the Battle of Actium. So are we going to accept that interpretation then? Because if we're going to have it for a time, we're obviously going to use that, and the only reason this would end is you're going to have the capital move. So we could say, so we say here strongholds, cast his devices upon the strongholds. So I think, because this is Swearingen, so he must be saying that this is just referring to his devices is this persecution. But we've taken this position that the strongholds is Rome, city of Rome. Okay, so does this, we're going to have more discussion on this?
So basically, are you just accepting Uriah Smith's understanding?
Well, Thomas Newton's understanding, as far as being from the city of Rome.
Hottest places equating to Egypt. And you had issues. So you had issues with, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers, which was to share the acquisitions and benefits of conquest with other lands.
Yeah.
So, is that not okay?
Well, so the idea here is that what he's done is that neither his fathers nor his fathers' fathers have done is the destruction of Jerusalem. And so I'm taking the scattering among them, the prey, the spoil, and the riches, is not among the people that he's conquered, but scattering these people. This is the dispersion of the Jewish nation after the destruction of the temple. Right.
So that was Swearingen's view.
Yes. So he's going to have that sort of view dealing with it. But I just had trouble with the idea that this was just how they conquered. I think that was Uriah Smith's, just the way in which they conquered. Yeah, and so we get this thing called the diaspora that happens after 70 AD with the destruction of Jerusalem. And that's what I think it refers to. That's my opinion, whatever that's worth. So what we had here, what they are going to do is destroy Jerusalem, right? So we know that that didn't happen with the different sieges and interactions with the Jews. They never destroyed the city. Titus is going to do that. And so he's going to, what's that?
That would be the he. He shall do that which his fathers have not done. So that would be
Titus. Yes. Yep, that's going to be Titus. And in a sense, it's Titus, but it's also just referring to Rome itself. But it's going to be through Titus. So whether he refers to just to pagan Rome, which is what I think it sort of refers to. So he's going to do something that he had never done before. It's going to be through Titus that occurs. So the he loosely does refer to Titus, but I think it more overall it just has to do with pagan Rome. So one of the things that we have here in this translation is we have this, again, we have a few Hebrew words that are put into an English sentence. So you have the word he shall scatter, right? 967. Among them, the prey, they're going to use just the one Hebrew word, 961, and then spoil 7998, and riches 7399. So to understand that sentence in Hebrew, right, or in English from translating in Hebrew, we have to add words, right? So we have to kind of understand what is being said. So the idea to scatter among them the prey. So I'm going to just do a quick analysis here. So the word scatter, it's just your verb. It's the cal imperfect. So it just means it's in the incomplete tense. Third person masculine singular. So he shall scatter, right? That's the third person masculine. And it's just one person. It's not, them. And then it's going to have a consecutive vav. So that's a vav and then the al. And now that number, for some reason, let me see here. So for some reason, there's a word that the King James doesn't even include. So there is a word, and I'm just trying to make sure that I'm actually seeing this correctly. So they have here just those four words in the King James. So you can see I have them numbered. And as far as the word among, right, we don't see any number for it. Right? Where is this here? Yeah, so you can see here you've got, it's going to have the scatter, the prey, the spoil, and the riches. But in the Hebrew, it actually has another word that's not included in the King James numbers in the Bible that we have online. So not sure why. And I'm going to just take a look, try to figure out what's going on.
That word against in verse 24 that you had,
Yeah.
at number 5, 58, 59, 21.
Yeah. 5921. Yeah.
Yeah, that where I got the Strong's Concordance and it don't show no number behind it, against.
You're saying that you don't see that word there?
No, I see the word, but you don't see the number behind it. Like that 59, 21. The concordance I'm using online.
Okay, well, I'm not sure why. I can't tell you why it doesn't have it. Because it's there. It's there in the Hebrew. So
Okay.
yeah, so yeah, it's got a vav there, vav al, so vaal. Yeah. So I'm just trying to figure out why they don't have this other word here. So he showed the device. This doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm going to try to figure this out. Sorry about that. I mean, I can show you what I'm looking at. So this is Scholar's Gateway. So with Scholar's Gateway, I can take a look at these different words, right? And I just hold the mouse over them, right? That's going to be father, right? It shows the form of the word, right? Father is an individual, right? And then it's going to show that it's a noun, masculine, plural, right? And then you're going to see, again, fathers, a masculine, plural noun, just a different form. And then you're going to have another masculine, just again, fathers, your father and your father's fathers. So it's got these things here that is at the end that means your. And then it's going to have bitsa, feminine singular root. That's the spoil, right? So that's 961. And then you're going to have sha'al, vesha'al it says, but it's sha'al. That's the prey. Could be translated as spoil as well, plunder. And then it's going to have the property, the goods, the possessions, right? So it's going to have this number 7399. And then it's going to have lachem. Now it's just a proposition that's them. And sort of, so this would be the one that's among them, I would think, right? So it doesn't have a number. And then it's going to say to scatter, right? So to scatter is at the end. And then you got 5922. So they have this instead of 5921, upon, over, on account of, above, to, against, right? So that's the one against the fortress. So it's this word here, lachem, that doesn't have a number attached to it. Right, so this is this word, right? If I click on this, it'll just says it's a preposition. Now, so what is a preposition? because they're going to use it to say among them, right? So it's going to scatter among them the spoil and the prey. And what is that justified by the text is, I guess, what I'm asking. Because that's part of this interpretation. Scattering among them the spoil and the prey, that it's being shared. That's Uriah Smith, right? He's going to. Right, because literally in Hebrew they have the prey, the spoil, the riches, he shall scatter, right? That's the way they put it in Hebrew. That's the word order. But here, among them the prey, we have to figure out why it says in the King James among them. Because the idea here is that they're going to conquer. This is Uriah Smith. They're going to conquer. And when they conquer, they're going to share the spoil and the booty to the people they conquer, which doesn't really make much sense. You're going to just take it from them and give it back. Maybe take it from the poor, give it to the rich. I don't know.
Okay, to answer your question from just a moment ago,
Okay.
prepositions would indicate relationships between other words in a given sentence.
Mhm.
But they're usually a very small, very common word that can show direction, location, time, or that introduces a specific object.
Right. So they're quite versatile little things. They're just part of our grammar.
Right.
Okay. So the idea that there is any indication that they're scattering among them the prey, the spoil, the riches, that's not really in the Hebrew, right? It could indicate direction. And so they might say, well, that's the direction is going to be among them. But the idea is just that they're going to scatter it. Like not among them. They're going to scatter the people, right?
But what if this is actually a reference to about scattering the prey?
So that's what I'm saying. It's scattering the prey, the spoil and the riches. So all of those things of Jerusalem are then going to be, with the destruction of Jerusalem, be scattered throughout the empire, including the people. So it's not scattering this among them. This is just the scattering of them, right? That is the people and the spoil and the riches within the Roman Empire that happens with the destruction of Jerusalem.
But whose riches are being scattered?
Those of Jerusalem.
Does that mean God's blessings are being scattered?
Well, I guess you could say that too. But Jerusalem is destroyed and the people are scattered and the spoil is scattered and the riches are scattered, right? That's just the literal thing of what happens. And so that's with the destruction of Jerusalem. So they're not scattering it among them. That's sort of my point. There's nothing in the Hebrew that would support that translation. So what I would normally do when I find something that they have done to sort of explain the sentence, normally you would say, it's always in italics, right? That's sort of what we kind of are taught. If it's not in the text, it's in italics, but that's not actually the case. There's lots of words that are needed to be added. Right. So, we don't have a Hebrew number for that word that preposition is, right? So it's not even considered as a Hebrew number. Lachem. But we would say that they're going to scatter this. So I just crossed out among them. So he, that is Rome, could say Titus or the Roman emperor, whatever we want to say, he's going to scatter the prey, those are the Jews, the spoil, and the riches, right? So this is the dispersion of the Jewish people after the destruction of Jerusalem, sometimes referred as the diaspora. or diaspora, however you say it. Probably diaspora, but anyway. And then yea, right? So again, you have a word yea. This is just a vav, right? It's just, I don't know why they put, they're just trying to make it into good English. But you can see that they just, in the King James, it's just an added, so it's not even a word, it's just, they're just taking the sense of this is something that's connected to what just is said, right? So yea, he shall forecast his devices, or plot his plottings, upon over from the strongholds, even for a time, 360 years. Right, so so I think this makes the most sense. And then it's going to say, Rome has done this to the Jews, but they're going to be doing this from Rome up until 330. Right? So when Constantine moves the capital. So this brings us all the way up to that period of time. So the idea here is that this group of verses, but this is actually, and I'm going to change this here a little bit because this is actually a different group, gives us a line where this group is going to give us another line. So this is going to be 25 to 29, probably, right? Because this is going to go back again to the Battle of Actium, right? So this one brings us to the end of that history. And then the next verse is going to give us the start of that period, going from the Battle of Actium, right, to 330. So it's just going to give us this Battle of Actium. So it's repeating and enlarging. So the idea is that we don't just have this continuous chronological flow in Daniel chapter 11, as some people assume, that it will go back and refer to things earlier. So there's a grouping here, and this is really about the Jewish League and the results, right? And the nation that does it, it's going to move its capital from Rome to Constantinople. So there's this persecution that's going to happen from the fortress of Rome. It's now going to move from Rome to Constantinople. And then in verse 25, well, it's going to go back, based on what we have here, this is going to be the Battle of Actium. It's going to go back to Octavian and Mark Antony, right? And that battle that goes on between Octavian or Augustus and Cleopatra and Mark Antony, right? So in 31 AD, they have the Battle of Actium. And it's kind of weird because Mark Antony doesn't really realize that he lost the battle when he leaves, because he didn't realize that all of his ships are going to surrender and that his soldiers, where he had left them back at Actium, they're going to all just defect over to Octavian, right? So really he is defeated, but it's not evident to him that he has been defeated until he flees. When him and Cleopatra flee, well, nobody stays loyal to him. The army and the navy don't. Right. And then we get into these, so we'll come back to that. Some of the stuff we'll look at tomorrow and probably next week in more detail. So both these kings, Octavian, Antony, right, heart shall be due to do mischief. They would both desire control of the Roman world. They shall speak lies at one table, form false alliances, but it shall not prosper. These agreements would last, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. right? Antony would be defeated in 31 BC and commit suicide and I don't know why, I don't have the date there, just have BC, so he's gonna, whenever he commits suicide, I don't know, I'll probably just get rid of this. I know it's gonna happen shortly after, so. And then he, Octavian, later Caesar Augustus, returns into his own land with great riches, and his pagan Rome's, Octavian's heart shall be against the Holy Covenant, Christianity, Judea, and Palestine. He shall do exploits, persecute Christians, settle the eastern territories, and return it to his own land. So, which is going to be Rome. So you can see that this is definitely going back. Probably we could, I'm not sure why we have these different. Yeah, so we're going to have, let's see, I would probably divide these sections differently. Any thoughts about any of this at this point? Does this seem reasonable, the historic application of these verses?
I think we're still working through it.
Okay. I mean, this is basically what we've been given. I don't think there's much difference here between Swearingen and Uriah Smith. I mean, we have the Battle of Actium, we have the death, we have now the speaking lies at one table. How have we understood this in verse 28 or 27?
I always looked at that as being similar to diplomacy.
Okay, but we made an application of it in our history. Jeff did.
Yes, I know.
So where was he placing this?
One of his comments had to deal with his dealing with Parminder regarding Future for America.
Right. Yeah. So he makes an application there dealing with Parminder. Now, of course, that's going to be later, right? So initially, when he makes an application, back in 2016, I mean, this is going to have to do with who? What? I mean, who's it going to be? Now, if he's having this as Octavian, well, Octavian is Caesar Augustus. He would be Obama, right?
Okay.
Right. So I can't remember specifically how he looked at it, but it had something to do with that history. But I don't know what he did with "for yet the end shall be at the time appointed," right? As far as making a present truth application. So, so if this historic application is correct, we still have made different applications to our history. And of course, in order to get a proper application to our history, one of the first things we have to do is make sure the historic application is correct. So if this is referring to Octavian, that is going to be Obama, I mean, how would we apply this whole Battle of Actium? I mean, to what would we apply it? Right. So that's part of the issue, right? We have to figure out what events are being described here. And, who is Cleopatra going to represent? Right? Egypt. Well, Egypt would represent the UN, right? The world. But it's Egypt and Cleopatra being under Mark Antony. So we have a woman who usually represents a church. We have Mark Antony. Who does he represent? Right. So you can see some of the problems as we start to look at this historical application. There are many things we have to sort out. And I think what we had done in the past is we sort of picked certain things that we applied, but there wasn't a consistent application of that history. So looking at that history first, we just kind of accepted whatever was given to us. I don't think there was a lot of thought as far as going beyond Uriah Smith in the interpretation of Daniel chapter 11. And you know, part of what I see, like even with Swearingen, what he has done is, you know, he's aware of the past interpretations of something, and he finds little differences here and there, right? So there are going to be things that he sees, well, he's going to interpret it differently. But, you know, and so like sometimes he's going to have Antiochus Epiphanies in places I don't think he should have. And so there's a few different things, but it's not a really a deep examination of it, right? It's sort of taking what's there and finding little things that are different. And I think the approach that we're using is much more getting down to brass tacks in studying these things, right? One is we're making connections that other people have not made. And so there could be things here in these verses that that will actually open this up a bit more, right? So in these verses here, I mean, we can see that there's things that fit in the historic interpretation, but maybe there's things that we have to see more clearly if we're going to make a present truth application. You know, so the idea of both these kings' hearts shall do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table. So this is, you know, this false alliance between Octavian and Antony. I mean, which definitely is, because I've studied the history now a little bit. I mean, they're not even really in communication with each other very much. You know, Antony's over in the east, Octavian's over in the west, right? They're so their agreement's not going to last. So I mean, that to me definitely seems like it fits. But yet the end shall be at the time appointed. So we know this time appointed, we had, well, even for a time. And that's one of the things that we have to figure out is this time appointed. I need to add the Hebrew in here too before the next study. Okay, so anyway, we're going to stop there. We're going to look at these verses tomorrow. I'm hoping next week that we can start to draw some of this out on a line. We'll see how far we get because I've moved a bit slower than I expected. Okay, so let's close in prayer. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for your goodness and love, and we ask for your blessing upon this day and upon our continued study of these verses. Be with each person. May your Holy Spirit watch over us. Let your angels protect us. And may you be with those that we love and care for, and help us to be an influence to those that we meet. We pray this and ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.